In the Gospel of John, the invitation is simple. Come and see. Come see Jesus, the one who meets us in our questions, who brings light into our dark places, who offers living water when we're thirsty for more. This isn't about religion. It's about knowing him deeply. The door is open. Come on in and find life in him.
When I was a junior in high school, I took guitar lessons for a few months and really thought that I had learned and was quite the musician. And was instructed, I learned on a silver tone guitar that came from Sears, one of the tuning pegs you had to use pliers for. So occasionally I would go into a music store to look at guitars, and we didn't have Guitar Center back then. It was locally owned. So even like when I first moved to Bellingham, there was Mojo Music, there was Mana Music, and locally owned ones. And I would go in and look at these Gibsons and Martins, and Ovations were big back in those days. And I was instructed, if you ever go into a guitar store, there are certain songs you must not play when you're sampling their guitars. Because in so doing, you will convince beyond any shadow of a doubt that you're not nearly as good as you're trying to portray yourself to be. So to leave no doubt in this room, I'd like to play some of those songs for you this morning. These are the songs that I was instructed not to play when I went into the guitar store. Maybe you'll recognize one or two of them. I'll just play a little bit of them. Anybody? Smoke on the Water. Okay, now here's the reason you should not play that, because what it demonstrates is that you have an older brother that taught you how to play one bar chord, and then you learned you could just move it around and play a song. It's like, what are you gonna do for the follow-up? Louie, Louie? Okay, no big deal. There's another one that you were not allowed to play, and I tried it last night, and I butchered it so bad that no one recognized it, which made the point that I'm trying to make. So I'm gonna tell you in advance what it's supposed to be, because my ego can't take it again. It's supposed to be Dust in the Wind. But apparently, I don't know. There you go. You hear it, kind of? Okay, kind of know what I'm talking about? Okay, you weren't supposed to play that one. Okay, no. Hold on, Mom, stop. Okay. But the key one, they said, never, ever play is this. That's why. Song. Okay, that one? Stairway to Heaven. Okay, that's one you should never play. Obviously, I'm demonstrating one of the reasons why. And I'm not sure why Stairway to Heaven had so much shade thrown its way, because it's really, really a good song. I mean, musically, it's got different movements, and it's it's powerful even in its lyrics. They're a little bit mystical, they're a little bit spiritual, they're a little deep, and I'm assuming that it's because it was overplayed, that everyone came in and played that. And so it was like, that would demonstrate you're not really that good of a guitar player, which I've really proven to you well today. But here's the thing, and I'm not saying that Jimmy Page and Robert Plant were prophets of God, but there are some of those lyrics in Stairway to Heaven that are actually profound. About halfway through, before it gets into the bridge, there's this line that says, "And a new day will dawn for those who stand long, and the forest will echo with laughter." And a new day will dawn for those who stand long, and the forest will echo with laughter. That's like right out of the prophets. The prophets would talk about this coming day, this new day. If you would endure, if you would stand, if you would stay true, there'd be this new day. And as far as the forest echoing, Isaiah 55 says, the mountains and the hills, they break forth with joy and the song, and the trees of the field clap their hands. It's an amazing thing that a new day would dawn, and even the forest would laugh about this coming one. I mean, even the name of the song, Stairway to Heaven, is biblical, right? Thank my guitar tech here. Yeah, thanks. It's the life of a show boy. It's not easy here, but even the name of the song, Stairway to Heaven, is biblical, because in Genesis 28, and I referenced this last week, when Jacob has this dream, it says this, Genesis 28:12, he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And this whole picture that there is a pathway, there is a stairway that connects heaven with earth and God with man. And I just thought, before we went any further today, we just needed to know that Stairway to Heaven is not that bad, because it's kind of biblical. Anyway, we're glad you're here today, here in the room. Those of you online, glad that you're here. And we're in this series on the book of John. We're going to be spending the whole year in this. It's one of the four Gospels. It's the last, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Not only that, but it was the last one that was written. It was written years after the other three had been written. And John does some things that the other three don't. He records things that they don't. A lot of different things. And one of the main ones is his whole purpose for even writing the book. Because he doesn't want to just talk about what Jesus did. His whole aim, his whole goal is to talk about who Jesus is. And he makes this really clear at the end of the gospel in John chapter 20, verse 31, when he says, all these things are written, this book that I've written, these things are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. That's his entire goal. And today we're going to continue on in that as we begin to look how he brings this picture of who Jesus is to us. We're going to be in John chapter 2. So if you have something that lights up like a phone or a tablet, or you have really good eyes, you can turn there in John chapter 2. We will get there. Before we do, however, there's a few things I need to do. So you're going to have to be patient. First, I need to finish last weekend's sermon. There was a part that I ran out of time, so I had to cut out. So I feel like it's important, not just because last weekend's sermon was incomplete, that's not the deal, because it helps paint this picture of what John is trying to do to help us understand who Jesus is. The second thing I need to do is I need to set up the framework for the event that we're going to be looking at, because the framework will fit for 6 other events that we'll look at over the coming year. So we kind of need to do that. The third thing is not something I need to do, it's something I want to do. And it's to take a little rabbit trail into some Old Testament parallels and contrasts. For some of you, you'll love that. Some of you can just check out during that time, and that's just more for me. Okay, so and then we'll get to chapter 2. Are we good? Can we do that? All right, so let's go back and finish last weekend's sermon. So where we left off, Jesus is inviting these guys, hey, just come and you will see, follow me. He has these 2 disciples of John the Baptist, Andrew and most likely John. They come and follow him. They invite their brothers. Andrew invites Simon who will become Peter, that's his brother. And John invites his brother James. And then Jesus finds Philip, and Philip finds his buddy Nathanael. And that's where we spent the most of our time last week, looking at Nathanael. The last thing that we looked at last week is what Jesus said to Nathanael out of John chapter 1, 51. And it says this, Jesus then added, I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Thus the reference back to the stairway to heaven. That there is a stairway to heaven, there is a connection, there is a pathway, but it's not just a dream, it's a reality now, and that it's not a stairway that we have to climb up and work our way to try to somehow achieve God. It's a stairway where God through Jesus comes down to rescue us. That he is the one that bridges this great divide, this chasm, this gap. It's Jesus. Now, we looked at that briefly last week. But what I didn't have time to go into is what Jesus calls himself at the end of verse 51. They will be ascending and descending on the Son of Man. This is a very important title, because it occurs frequently in the Gospels. 83 times in the Gospels, we will see this title. 13 times in the book of John, we will see the title, Son of Man. And here's the interesting thing, that the only one who ever calls Jesus Son of Man is Jesus himself. None of the other disciples do. No one else does. This is Jesus' favorite description for himself. And part of that is because it illustrates the dual nature of Jesus, that he was completely human and he was completely divine, he was completely God. So this Son of Man title, on the one hand, it's very modest. At the same time, it's unbelievably majestic. So when he says to Nathanael and to others later about himself that he is the Son of Man, there's a modest proposal there. He's saying, listen, I'm one of us. I am of human descent as well, like Mary was his mom. And he said, I identify with you in your humanity, in being a flesh, Emmanuel, God with us. In Psalm 8, where it says, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have set in place. What is man that you are mindful of him? The Son of Man that you care for him. God, we're just humans. And Jesus says, I'm human like you. In Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 5, where it says that while being in very nature God, he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. I'm a son of man. I'm just like you. I'm a human. Or in Colossians chapter 2, where it says, in Christ, all the fullness of the deity dwells in bodily form. I'm a son of man. Very modest. Identifies with us, puts himself on our level. But there's another side as well. And Nathanael would have probably been aware of this. Because the prophet Daniel talks about a vision that he had. And in this vision, he sees a Son of Man. Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14 says this. In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like a Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshiped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. When Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, he's saying, yes, I identify with you, I am human. But when he calls himself the Son of Man, he said, I have all power, authority, glory. My dominion will never end, and people will worship me. That's quite a claim. And I'm thinking Nathanael saw him as the Son of Man, as a human, because remember when Philip came and says, we found Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph, he saw him on that Son of Man human side, and he got a little bit of a glimpse when Jesus talked about the fig tree. Remember that? And he says, oh, you are the Son of God. But he is going to see in such incredible clarity the power and the greatness of Jesus. Now, you can claim that. I can claim that. We can all claim, yeah, I've got power, I've got authority, and all this stuff. But if you're going to proclaim that, you better be able to prove it. And Jesus does that. Like, he doesn't just explain it, he embodies it. He doesn't just describe this Son of Man, he demonstrates it. And we'll see that in this event that we're going to look at today in John chapter 2. We're not there yet, but we will get there. And it's a miracle. It's Jesus' very first miracle. Now, keep in mind that John is an old man now, and as he's had decades really to look back on his experiences with Jesus, he begins to have some insights about some of the things that Jesus said and did that maybe the other gospel writers didn't have at that time. As he thinks back and the Holy Spirit begins to reveal some stuff to him and he begins to connect some dots, he gives a depth of understanding. In fact, at the end of the passage we're going to look at today, we're going to be in John 2, 1 through 11 eventually. Verse 11, he says this, the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. Thus, he revealed his glory and his disciples put their faith in him. John never calls the miracles miracles. He always refers to them as signs. In fact, most translations don't even have that word miraculous here. It just says the first of his signs. He talks about them as signs. A sign points to something else. A sign announces something else. A sign is a marker toward or for something greater. That these miracles don't stand alone as just events in history. They point to something. And as the years have gone by, he begins to see there's a depth to these things. It's not just a miracle. It's a sign that points to who this Jesus is and what he's come to do. Let me try to illustrate this on the whole sign thing. Last month, my mom turned 88. And I know you're not supposed to tell a woman's age, but normally she watches on Saturday night. She's at a retreat. So she texted me this morning and said, you told them all I was 88. Here's the deal. If you've gone past 85, brag about every year you're alive. So she turned 88 last month, and I went down to Vancouver to take her out to a nice dinner. You know, we were going to do some stuff, but just mom and son. My siblings weren't there, not Larry, her husband. Just mom and I were going to take her to a really nice dinner. And so we did, just son and mother time at a really nice dinner. In fact, I took a picture before we went in for dinner, a picture of my mom and I at this really nice dinner that we went to. Now, you see the sign of where we were going. And that sign is a glorious sign. That sign is a beautiful sign. That sign makes me warm inside, glad to be alive. But you can't stop at the sign, because the sign is pointing to a greater glory that's just beyond. The sign is pointing to the answer to Jesus' prayer in the Lord's Prayer. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's what it's pointing to. The sign is pointing to a divine glory that is manifest in a double animal. If the sign is pointing to something greater. And when John talks about these events that happen, they're signs that are wonderful, but they point to something even greater. Now, we're going to see over the course of the months that he points to 7 different signs. Here are the 7 signs. We would call them miracles. He calls them signs. 7 signs found in John. Water into wine, healing the nobleman's son, healing at the pool of Bethesda, feeding of the 5,000. Jesus walks on water, healing the man born blind, and Lazarus raised from the dead. Now, the other thing we're going to find throughout this study is that John throws in details, little details, and they're not just filler. When you see these details, you're like, why would he put that in? And one of them is numbers. Now, there's 7 of these signs that he records. In the Hebrew mind, the number 7 was the number of perfection. It was the number of completion. And while he says there are these signs, what he's showing with the aggregate of the 7 is that in Jesus there is a completion, there's a perfection. And 6 of them happen only in John. The feeding of the 5,000, all 4 gospel writers talk about that one, but the others, only John does. And so what you see with these signs is that there's the surface miracle, which is the event. We'll look at that. But there's a deeper meaning on this sign. There's a deeper meaning, which is the reality that it points to. That it's not just this story. It doesn't just stand alone. There's something underneath it that you've got to be aware of. Again, let me try to illustrate it this way. It's been years since I've been there, but in Disneyland, in Adventureland, there used to be, and may still be, a restaurant called Blue Bayou. And you go in here, and it kind of feels like you're in the deep south. You know, they've got it dark, and there's fireflies, mechanical fireflies, and cypress trees with the Spanish moss hanging in the swampy area. And it's this beautiful restaurant, wonderful restaurant. But underneath the restaurant, the Pirates of the Caribbean is going on. So you can go up and sit in the restaurant and enjoy a meal, but what you don't realize is that the greater reality, the real action is underneath the restaurant. And he's saying, hey, there are these events, there are these signs, there are these things that happen, but don't miss what's underneath it. Don't miss the greater thing. Because John doesn't want to just give you the facts about what happened. He wants to give you the meaning of what those facts actually were pointing to, what they actually meant. Again, let me try to illustrate this. I've never shared this, but a couple years ago, my wife had an experience that literally scarred her for life. She was approached by a man who had a mask on, a hat, and gloves. All you could see was his eyes, with a knife in his hand, demanding money. Scarred for life. Those are the facts. Here's the meaning underneath it. That man was Dr. Michael Thorpe, who's an orthopedic surgeon who was coming in with a mask and a hat and a knife to do a surgery, and the money was to pay for the anesthesiologist in the surgery center and all of those things. And yes, she is scarred for life, but it's a different story if you don't understand the meaning behind it. And sometimes we just look at these miracles and we just see this, and John's saying, no, don't stop there. You've got to understand the meaning underneath it. You've got to understand what's really going on, what I really want you to hear and see through this. So it's a miracle that's very, very familiar. I mean, it's referenced by people that have never even read the Bible, don't even go to church. Years ago, we used to have a ministry called Salt on the Street, where we would go to downtown Bellingham on Saturday nights and serve a meal and sing songs, have a service, hand out clothes and socks. And if people showed up late for the meal, they could get a sack lunch with a sandwich and a bottle of water and chips and what have you. And I didn't volunteer down there a lot, but one One Saturday night after our Saturday night service, I went down to help out. And because of our Saturday night services, and I went down a little bit late, so they were done serving dinner. But there were people that were showing up and getting sacked lunches. And an individual I'd never seen before, he came up to me and said, "Pastor, would you pray for this?" I said, "What?" He had his water bottle. I said, "Would you pray for this?" And I said, "I suppose." And they said, "Well, Jesus turned water into wine. I thought you'd maybe pray for this for me." Everyone has heard about this miracle. In fact, some of you have quoted this reference, and it's usually to justify your use of alcohol. Honestly, I've heard more people quote this miracle to justify their drinking alcohol. Hey, listen, if all you get out of this miracle is that Jesus says it's okay to have a glass of wine at dinner, you've missed the entire point. Completely missed it. We're not even going to reference that. We're not even going to address that issue. I do like what Warren Wiersbe said. He said, if you use Jesus as your example for drinking, well, why don't you follow his example in every other area of your life? Ooh, ouch. Come on, Warren. Okay, but we're not into that yet. All right, well, we will get there. Now, I did say there was one other thing I didn't need to do, but I wanted to do. And that is in this opening sections of John, these parallels in contrast to the Old Testament. Just humor me and let me do it real quick, and it kind of ties in. All right, John chapter 1, 17, and I know some of you are saying, we're going backwards in the book. I know. John chapter 1, verse 17, it says this, "For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ." Wow, there's so much right there, but there's this contrast, Moses and Jesus, the law and grace and truth. And as I began to think about that, I began to think of all of these parallels. Some of them we've already talked about. These parallels in contrast between what John writes and what Moses wrote. Because Moses is attributed as the writer of the Pentateuch, and John as the Gospel of John. And Moses writes, "In the beginning, God," in Genesis 1. And John writes, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Ooh, very similar. And Moses writes, "In the beginning, God created." And John writes in John chapter 1, "Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." Interesting. In Genesis chapter 2, we see where God makes Adam a helper, a partner, a marriage. "For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. This man and this woman become one flesh." And in John chapter 2, Jesus is at a wedding. Ooh, cool parallel. In the Pentateuch, in Exodus, there's extreme amount of detail talking about the tabernacle, and this tabernacle is where the presence of God would dwell, where his glory, the Shekinah glory would be. It would be in this tabernacle amongst his people. And in John chapter 1, verse 14, it says that the Word became flesh and dwelt, and it could literally be translated, and tabernacled amongst us, and we have seen his glory. The glory of the one and only. That all of this points to this. It's just, I find it so fascinating. Some of you are like checked out a long time ago. We'll get to chapter 2. But then there's one other one. That when Moses is coming as the deliverer to take God's people out of bondage, he does something with a plague. And his first plague is that he turns water into blood because of judgment. Years later, Jesus comes along in a new day, and his first sign, his first miracle, he turns water into wine, which is a representation of joy. Isn't that beautiful? Like there's these firsts. And this picture of wine, and again, I'm not even going to address this whole issue, but symbolically, metaphorically, wine in the Hebrew mind was just seen as this life and joy and celebration. One more and then we'll get to it. Amos chapter 9 says this, "The days are coming," like Stairway to Heaven. "A new day will dawn for those who stand long. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when the reaper will be overtaken by the plowman and the planter by the one treading grapes. New wine will drip from the mountains and flow from all the hills. I will bring back my exiled people Israel. They will rebuild the ruined city and live in them. They will plant vineyards and drink their wine. They will make gardens and eat their fruit." When it says new wine will drip from the mountains and flow from all the hills, he's speaking very metaphorically of this joy that will just pour out in great abundance. And from the mountains, there will be these rivers of wine. He's not talking literally. He's saying there's going to be so much joy, so much life, so much celebration, so much abundance. And all this contrast, Moses, Jesus, old, new, law, grace, blood, wine, curses, blessing, judgment, joy. All of it pointed to the fulfillment in Jesus. All right, now, let's get going. Now we'll start the sermon. John chapter 2. All right, let's take a look at this. And again, we're going to start off slow. We will speed up. John chapter 2, verse 1. On the third day. Well, hold on. We got to stop right there. Now, last week we looked at it saying the next day, the next day, the next day. Now he says on the third day. The third day of what, John? The third day of the week, the third day of the month, third day of the year, third day of the wedding, third day of the celebration. What third? And maybe it's like, you've missed the point. And maybe John is already dropping some breadcrumbs. Maybe he's already saying, before I even get into this sign, I'm going to be pointing to something else. Because he says on the third day, anything else happened on a third day? Could it be from the very beginning he's saying, what is happening here at this wedding is going to point to something that will happen 3 years from now? Jesus will save a wedding, but there will be another third day miracle that will save the world. And even from the beginning, he's saying, don't miss this. All right. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana of Galilee. Stop again. Nathanael, we will find out, was from Cana. That's where he was from. And if you were here last week, you remember he didn't have good things to say about Nazareth. Remember that? Nazareth, can anything good come from Nazareth? What you may not be aware of is this. Cana and Nazareth were about 4 miles away from each other. There's this rivalry it's like Burlington and Mount Vernon without the river. There's just not that distance. And some would speculate that this may have been Nathanael's wedding. Some may we're not even going into all those speculations, but Nathanael is there. They're in his hometown. Jesus' mother was there. Okay, wait, we got to stop right there now for a second. Because what's an interesting point is, in the Gospel of John, when it says Jesus' mother, this is not a trick question. Who are we talking about? Mary. John never refers to her as Mary in his Gospel. It's not because he can't spell the word. Because he talks about Mary Magdalene and Mary and Martha and Mary, whose husband was Clopas and all he talks about other, but he never refers to Jesus' mother as Mary. And I began to think, okay, why would he do that? And I wonder, this one's speculation, okay? Because by this time, Mary has already passed away. I wonder if in the church, there had already begun an unhealthy elevation of Mary to a status that she was never supposed to hold. And maybe he's saying, listen, it is not about Mary. That when he calls her the mother of Jesus, he's not name dropping to elevate her. Maybe he's deflating some of what has been happening and always tying her to point to the real attraction. That she is the mother of Jesus. She's Jesus' mother. It's always pointing to Jesus. We got to keep going or we'll never get out of here. All right. Okay, Jesus' mother was there. And Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. So now he's got 6 disciples, right? We've already established that. I find it interesting that right after saying that he and his disciples show up, the next line says this: when the wine was gone. Like, Jesus, you brought these guys in here. They weren't really invited. We had enough, but you bring these 6. You said, follow me, and they took you literally, and they came thirsty. All right, when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother, not Mary, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. And there's all kinds of speculation. Why would this bother her? Why does she have the authority? Whose wedding is it? Is it a relative? We don't care about that today. But she comes to him and says, Jesus, there's a problem. Do something about it. Now, this is the one time I will say, gentlemen, men, boys, don't follow Jesus' example in this next word. Verse 4, woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my time or my hour has not yet come. You look at that and you're like, whoa, that's kind of harsh to talk to your mother that way. No, don't tell me my business, devil woman. Stand back. I mean, that is not it at all. In fact, the word woman here is a tender term of respect. It's the same word he will use in John 19 when he's hanging on the cross and he looks down and he sees his mom and he sees John and he says to her, woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. And then Mary gives the best and shortest sermon of all times. Some of you wish I would preach more like Mary. This sermon is so applicable. Verse 5, here's Mary's sermon. His mother, not Mary, but his mother said to the servants, here's her sermon. Do whatever he tells you. Shall we close in prayer? Yeah, no, not us. Them. Okay. That's her sermon. Do whatever he tells you. You don't have to understand it. It doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. Just do whatever he tells you. You know, around here we talk about the reason we exist is to help people find and follow Jesus. You know what following Jesus is? Doing whatever he tells us. We take this and we see this. And so in response to that, John gives us some really interesting little details. Verse 6. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. There's so much possibility here. Again, I mentioned the 7 is this picture of completion and perfection. The number 6 was a picture of incompletion, impurity. I mean, you've heard the number 666, this mark, this of man, of sin, of rebellion. And he says there's 6 of these jars. And they're used for ceremonial cleansing. Like the ceremonial cleansing was the law, and it could do this ceremony, but it really couldn't cleanse you from the inside. And it's almost as if he's implying that there's something deeper here. That there are these 6 incomplete, imperfect jars that represent the law that can never really change. And almost as if to say, but Jesus is the 7th vessel. Jesus is going to do what the law will never do. The water will cleanse you ceremonially. Jesus will change you internally. And it's almost like the 6 isn't enough. As the kids would say today, 6, 7. That Jesus is the 7th one. And if we don't have time, but okay, real quick. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, it says, let him who said, let there be light. He let the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face, gave us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus. And then the next verse says, and we have this treasure in jars of clay. Oh, I wish we could do that. Okay, we got to keep going. Where are we? All right, let's keep going. Verse 7, Jesus said to his servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. Mary had told them, do whatever he tells you. This was Jesus' instructions. Fill, draw, take. That's it. They don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to them. Just fill, just draw, just take. And you notice Jesus doesn't even go over there. Doesn't even touch the jars. Doesn't even touch the water. Why? Because he just speaks, and as the Son of Man, who has all authority and all power, he can just speak and things happen. At the end of verse 8, these 3 words, they did so. Oh, that would be said of me. And Jesus says, and I did so. That would be said of us. Jesus said, and we did so. Here's the principle on this one, is that trust and obedience preceded the miracle. They trusted, they didn't understand. They obeyed, they didn't know what. For all they know, and we don't know when the water actually turned into wine, all they know is they filled up these bottles, and now they're basically honestly taking bath water to the master of the banquet. It does not make any sense to them at all. but they're going to trust what he says and they're going to be obedient. I grew up, as some of you did in the church, singing Trust and Obey. You know, when we walk with the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. As we do his good will, he abides with us still, and to all who will trust and obey. To trust and obey, because there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. And they did. They trusted and obeyed. Verse 9, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Oh, here's another sermon. Jesus revealed something to the lowest in the house that he won't reveal to the highest. Oh, okay, that's so awesome. Then he being the master of the ceremonies, he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. And he ends the whole scene with these words at the end of verse 10. But you have saved the best till now. We could talk about how this wine that Jesus made out of water was of greater quality, but we'll miss the point. The wine, yes, you've saved the best till now, but what's the sign? In that little phrase, it's the picture of the entire Bible. That there was Moses, there was the laws, there were the priests, there were the sacrifices, there was the ceremonial cleansing, there were the prophets, all of those things. But like the 6 jars, they were incomplete. But now, you have saved the best till now. Not only does this miracle be a sign that points to Jesus, all of the Old Testament is a sign that points to Jesus. The completion, the perfection, the best till right now. And then back where we started, verse 11. This, the first of the signs Jesus performed at Cana of Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. Yeah, he saved a wedding. John says, don't stop there. Yeah, he brought joy to the wedding party. He says, yeah, but don't stop there. That's a picture of something far more significant, far deeper, far more meaningful. He not only saved a wedding, he saved the world. He not only brings joy to a party, he brings joy to our lives. 6 of these things that hold 20 to 30 gallons, like abundance, like do the math, 120 to 180 gallons, it's abundance. Like Amos said, like wine that flows from the rivers. Like Jesus brings an abundance that you can't get through the law, you can't get any other way. And for 3 years, his followers see this played out again and again and again. And now as an old man, John looks back and says, I never got it when I was a teenager. I didn't understand it then. I thought it was just on the surface. I thought it was just an event. Man, Jesus was revealing the whole reason he even came and what he would do. And 3 years later, almost like bookends, he starts the first with these disciples at a wedding, turning water into wine. And then three years later, they're gathered for a Passover feast. In Matthew 26, Jesus took the cup, he gave thanks, and he offered it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. This is kind of like what they did at the wedding, right? 3 years earlier. But then he puts a twist on it. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. What the ceremonial cleansing could never do, what the law could never do. Now this wine represents my blood. That Jesus would drink the bitter cup. In Isaiah 53, it says that he was crushed for our iniquities, kind of like grapes are crushed for wine. Jesus would taste death so that we could experience life. Jesus would drink the sorrow so that we could have rivers of joy. Why would he do that? Because of his love for us. In John 15, we'll get to this in the spring, don't worry. John 15, He said, I've done this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. And he says to his disciples, so now this is what I want you to do. Every time you eat this bread or you drink this cup, do it in remembrance of me. And today we're going to end with communion. We're going to do this in remembrance of him. But I want us to do it a little differently today. Because we've been talking about a joy-filled wedding celebration. Listen, I know, communion, the Eucharist, very somber, very serious. My whole life, I get that. Examine yourself. Remember the sacrifice of Christ. Yes, absolutely. But today, we're talking about a wedding with rivers of joy. Today, when we take communion, I don't want it to be a contemplation, meditation moment. I want it to be a celebration of what Jesus has done for us. I mean, because isn't that, some of you are saying, well, that's a stretch for me. I know you need to be stretched. Hebrews 12 says this, verse 2. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Why would he do that? Why would he die? So that he could be with his bride and experience joy. Why would he take the cup of sorrow and suffering? So that we could have the cup of abundance and joy. Years ago, Tony Campolo wrote a book entitled, The Kingdom of God is a Party. And I know there's times for seriousness, and we need to take God and his word very, very seriously. But sometimes we take ourselves too seriously. And sometimes we need to remember we are the bride of Christ, and he did all that so that he could be married to his church. And we can celebrate in that. Let me just, real quick, and then I'll stop. Imagine this. A wedding. Father is walking his daughter down the aisle. It's her big day. It's the bride's big day. People are there. She's got all this hair and makeup done and this dress. Beautiful people, friends. All that. He's walking her down the aisle, and on the way down the aisle, as everyone's standing, he just whispers to her, sweetheart, you have no idea how much this cost your mother and I. I hope you enjoy this because I'm going to have to work extra years. I had to cash in some of my retirement to make this happen for you. I really hope that you'll stop and think about that. Who would do that? The reception comes, toasting the groom and the bride. Father of the bride stands up. You guys are all enjoying this banquet. Do you know how much I had to pay for this? I want you to just be somber for a minute and just think about how much I had to pay for this. Oh, we want you to enjoy it. Yeah, but don't get too excited here. This cost me a lot. No one would do that. They want the bride to rejoice and experience this joy. Well, I know we need to focus on what the price was, but don't you think our groom who loves his bride would say, yeah, I paid it, but it was for the joy, it was for the celebration. So remember it that way. In Revelation, okay, I promise I'll be done with this one. Revelation chapter 19, verse 7. Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory. For the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It's a wedding. It's what he did in Cana of Galilee. He's pointing to what he would do on the cross so that he could be married to his bride. So today, we're going to take communion, and I don't want it to be meditation and contemplation. It will be celebration. Okay, so here's what I got to give you some instructions. There's 4 stations. There'll be 2 lines at each station. When you're going there, don't go like this. High five someone, fist bump someone, dance. I've asked for a very upbeat song for this one. Dance, clap, as long as you don't have juice in your hand. But celebrate this. You got to high five or fist bump somebody. Get your elements, and don't wait around till the moment's right. Go now and get your elements, and then come back. We're all going to do this together. Let's get this party started.